I had these two squares left over from a project. Originally, this was going to be a cardigan or a blanket, and then I just kept going with smaller squares to make a simple shawl. But I did have these two squares because I thought originally they would be the back or the front of the sweater or the cardigan, and when I ended up making the shawl with just the small squares, these bigger squares ended up in the basket of forgotten unfinished objects. I thought that maybe I could join the squares to make a bag or frame them as wall art or make a basket or crochet more squares and make a blanket, but I couldn't decide. But then I kept seeing crochet bags and I decided that's what I could do, where you have the three granny squares joined like this with the third square serving as the bottom of the bag. And because I didn't want to have a gap at the top, I decided to make a granny triangle. But basically I wanted to play around with the different shapes and see what I could make with the squares and give them a purpose. I just think it's sad when unfinished objects end up forgotten in a basket, so I just wanted to use them. I like the color combo and I didn't want to frog the squares and end up with random small bits of yarn, and this felt like the perfect project for them. So I just needed to make one more granny triangle to add to the bag. Granny triangles are not something I usually make, so whenever I make them, it takes me a few tries before I relearn how to make them. Similar to a granny square, in a granny triangle, you work 3 double crochet stitches in between clusters. At the top of the triangle, you work 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets in the same space before going back down the other side. At the end of the row, you work 3 double crochet in the last stitch and turn. Making this granny square bag came at a time when I needed a break from my other projects. I needed a project I could relax with, something mindless yet mindful. And granny squares, granny triangles, and granny stitches in general are just so soothing to me. They can get tedious if you're doing it over and over again like anything in life, but it's a very comforting and easy stitch to crochet. So with the squares and the triangles finished, I clipped them together at the corners with some locking stitch markers so that I could sew them together. For the strap, I took some inspiration from All About Amy, where she crochets around the cord. I had a nylon cord that I crocheted single crochet stitches around and secured the cord and stitches directly into the side of the bag. The bag was basically done, but I didn't stop there. I grabbed an old pillowcase from my fabric scraps and made a simple liner with a zipper. I traced out an outline of the bag onto the fabric and cut out the shape. It's a simple rectangle, so I didn't measure anything, I just traced around and cut. I didn't even iron the fabric, that's how easygoing I was with this project. I had RuPaul in the background talking about his life and work in his masterclass. It made me cry, it was so good and inspiring, I recommend that particular class. Before sewing the liner, I worked on adding a zipper. Now, zippers and I do not have the best relationship. We are reluctantly drawn to each other and yet skeptical and suspicious of one another, so it's always a test of patience when we meet. There was a brief moment when I toyed with the idea of using my sewing machine to attach the zipper, but I chose to sew the zipper by hand and avoid any intense frustration. One day, zippers and I will find common ground and I will figure out which is the zipper foot and how to use it. But today, we sew by hand. After attaching the zipper to both sides, I flip the liner inside out or right side out, it's a liner, so the inside is the right side, you know what I mean. Again, I decided to sew the liner by hand because at this point, was there even a point to set up a sewing machine? After making the liner, I randomly decided to make a tiny granny square pouch to go with the bag. This little pouch would hold things like my lip balm and gum and other small items that I want to keep together. It's basically a small replica of the big bag with the 3 granny squares and the 2 triangles. So around the time that I started working on this granny square bag, I had wanted to get back to some older video games and decided to revisit Stardew Valley. It had been around 4 years since I had last played, and I thought I could just continue where I left off. I had essentially finished the game, but there were just a few things I hadn't finished, and yes, I am a completionist, but don't ask me what those unfinished tasks were because it's been so long I don't remember. But not only that, I had forgotten how to play the game, and there had been quite a few updates since I had last played. I couldn't remember if I had been using a keyboard and mouse or a controller or even what buttons and keys to use. There was a lot of not knowing how to do things, and I almost stopped playing because of that. But instead, I literally Googled, "I forgot how to play Stardew Valley." And luckily, I found other people who experienced this video game memory lapse. On Reddit, a lot of people were offering suggestions on how to do things like talk to the townspeople, check the weather, all this helpful information, but only one person said, just start again, start a new game. It's going to be less stressful if you start a new game, and that way you can relearn the game again. So that's what I did. And it makes me think of crochet projects that I haven't looked at in months or even years, where I didn't take any notes, I didn't know where I had left off, what hook size I was using, the tension, or the goal of the project. Those are projects where it's better to just start from scratch, repurpose the yarn if I have to, and make a completely different project with it. So here's the little pouch, and looking at it now, I could have just made 2 squares instead of the 3 squares and 2 triangles because you can't even tell them apart. Either that or I could have sprinkled some different colors in each of the squares, but hindsight is 2020. Anyway, I even made a liner with some of the pillowcase fabric and used a snap closer to finish it all up. And that is the finished crochet granny square bag. Since making this bag, I've used it quite a bit, especially when I'm running out the door and need a quick and casual bag. It's been great for running errands, going to the store, and it actually holds quite a bit of weight, as I discovered one day that I stopped in at the wine store and forgot shopping bags. I was actually able to fit and carry 2 wine bottles in this bag, so the nylon cord definitely came in handy in keeping the strap from stretching. It's such a great bag, and I'm so happy I could use the squares for this project. So here's your sign to pull out those old and forgotten projects and give them a new life. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.